everybody, welcome back to Kitchen Witchin', coming to you from the ugliest kitchen in America. I'm your host, Susie Bianco. Thanks for joining me today. Now, on today's episode, it's pretty scary. It's coming for us. It's the unbakening! Ah! We're making no bakes. And some other stuff. Yeah. So, you won't get to hear me complain about my broken oven again. Other than that, that's the only time, I swear. So, we're starting off with no bakes, which apparently are a local favorite that I didn't realize. Then we're moving on to some super easy no-bake cheesecake. The only heat that gets introduced in that is melting a stick of butter. That's it. And then we have a bit of an interesting gourmet specialty. Very easy, very quick, only 3 ingredients. It's called Zabaglione, or Zabaglione, or in French, Sabayon. It's basically like a thin, runny egg custard that people eat over berries or as a dip with biscotti or other cookies. So it's going to be an interesting show, I hope. We're going to make some delicious stuff, and we're going to get started on our no-bakes in just a second. All right, everybody. We are about ready to start on our no-bakes. But we have to do a little bit of prep work first. For example, for the no-bakes, take all of the cutting boards and oven inserts that you have and put parchment paper on them, because you're going to need them. I'm not joking. And a spoon so you can dole everything out. I'm going to leave that there. And then for the rest of the show, we need to do a little bit more prep work on that too. So we're going to take out 2 8-ounce containers of cream cheese, just like these, and let these heat up to room temperature. And we're going to take out, let's see here, 5 eggs, and we're going to let them cook up to room temperature too. And by the time we get to filming those, that should be good. All right. Now we can get started. Now, no bakes are interesting. I made these a couple of weeks ago. It was the first time I made them in, I don't know, 15 years, something like that. I was looking for something sweet. My partner was out at a show, and I was making dinner for him. And so I was like, oh, I haven't made no bakes in a while. So he comes home and he starts eating me like, these are really good. What are these? And honestly, I was a little bit flabbergasted because I thought everybody knew what no bakes were. Well, digging a little deeper into it, as you know by now that I like to do, it turns out that no bakes are actually from Lemoyne, Pennsylvania, which is, for all intents and purposes, basically a suburb of Harrisburg, our state capital. That's where these were invented. So this might not be something that's really well known across the country, and probably not internationally, which is a shame because these are super easy and kind of fun to make. And if you have kids that like to bake, this is something really good to get them started on. This is actually one of the first things I learned to bake. When I was 11 or 12, I was living at my grandmother's house, and my cousins and I used to whip these up all the time, and generally made a huge mess. But it was fun, and it was a good learning experience, you know? So, I hope that this is something that those of you who have never heard of no-bakes, definitely go out and enjoy making with your kids, because it is really cool. So what we're going to do is start with a whole stick of unsalted butter, and we're going to toss that in our big saucepan here. And turn this on. We're going to turn it on to about medium. We're going to be working with butter and milk, so you don't want to go too crazy with the heat. I'm going to let that melt. And we're going to be doing this in 2 stages, on the heat and off the heat. And what we're going to be doing on the heat is a half a cup of milk. This generally calls for whole milk, but you can use 2% if you want. Pour that in. 2 cups of sugar, just regular white sugar, and 4 tablespoons of cocoa powder. You can melt chocolate if you want to. It's fine. I generally just use cocoa because it keeps better for longer. Now that's going to heat up for a little bit. And we also have 3 cups of old-fashioned oats, not instant oats. Just make sure those are uncooked. And if you want, you can like crunch those down a little bit so they aren't so big. I know I tend to do that too. We also have a teaspoon of vanilla extract and half a cup of peanut butter. Now we're going to add these in after this comes to a boil. But you have to be very careful because especially if you're using melted chocolate, because once you get the chocolate to a nice temper, you could overcook it. It'll taste weird. It'll be crumbly. That's how you know you've overcooked it. So what we want to do is basically melt the butter, mix everything up, and then immediately take it off of the boil. And then we're going to go ahead and mix the rest of our ingredients in. But this doesn't require very much heat, and you want to be careful that you don't overheat it, because it will have a bad effect on your cookies afterwards. Okay. So as you can see, I'm just stirring this up, waiting for the butter to melt, which might be a little bit. I probably should have put it on before I started filming, but, you know. In the interest in truth and journalism, you know, and transparency. Sometimes it helps if you break the butter up. It'll melt faster. But we just want to, at this point, just make sure we get everything mixed up so it's nice and smooth and not grainy. Make sure you are getting the sides and the bottom too. Okay, our butter is almost completely melted. As you can see, there's still a little bit in there, but it's nice and creamy and smooth. So we're going to just bump the heat up a little bit. Now you don't want to put this on high, but we do want to get it to a bit of a boil. And that's just going to take a couple minutes. In the meantime, we can keep stirring. There we go. Looks like our butter's all about melted there. And it sounds like the sugar is pretty much all mixed in. As you can tell sometimes when you're stirring it, you can hear the graininess. And keep scraping the sides down. Okay, we're starting to get some small, slow bubbles forming around the edges. That's good. I'm going to keep that going just until it sort of reaches further into the bowl. It'll start at the edges and kind of come in. But once it hits that rolling boil, shut the heat off. Let it go for a minute. Bubbles are starting to boil out, spread around. I know I should have the camera facing down on this so you can see it better. Now it's very, very little, but you can see bubbles starting to form, small bubbles changing the color on the top of the chocolate. if you can hear it, it's bubbling pretty strongly here. So we're going to go ahead and shut that off. And quickly add in our vanilla, our peanut butter, Gonna give that a quick little mix in just to get it started melting. But it should be hot enough that it shouldn't take too long. So, now we're gonna go ahead and toss our oats in. And just stir up everything. I'm gonna look over here now. And so as this starts to cool down, obviously it's going to start to solidify. It's a little bit soft right now, so you can let that sit for a little bit so you don't have, like, pancake no bakes. Those are good too. It's not like a normal cookie where it just goes flat and then it gets crunchy and it's terrible, but if you want something a little bit more petite for tiny hands, then you can let it sit for a little bit. Okay. That is nice and mixed up. So in the meantime, what we're going to do is take just a spoon of any size, depending on what size cookie you want. Or you can even use one of these. These are nice, but they take forever to clean. So I tend to just use normal eating spoons. And we can just plop it down, push it off. Now it's still going to be hot, so you don't. You might not want to do this with your fingers, but. Somebody's a little bit small, you can add a little bit to it. And honestly, don't worry if they look a little funny. That's kind of the point, I think. And if you want to be a little bit extra creative, get some molds or cookie cutters and just pour it in and let it sit, and it'll harden up to the shape of the cookie cutter. You know, if you don't like random blobs with oatmeal sticking out of them. That reminds me of my childhood, so no cookie cutters for me. Ooh, a little hot. Okay. And obviously, if you don't want to stick your finger into really, really hot chocolate, because you're not a lunatic like me, you can use another spoon to push it off, and it'll have the same effect without burning your finger. And onto our last here. Oops. Yeah, they'll do that. They're still a little bit liquid right now, so you will fling them all over the kitchen if you're not careful. All right. Now, I wouldn't put these in. I would. I wouldn't put these in the fridge because sometimes when chocolate is setting up, if it's introduced to cold, it can get a little hard and crunchy. We don't want to do that. The best thing to do is just find an open space, and I know looking around my kitchen it's not always easy to find that, and just let them sit for a little bit. They'll set up at room temperature. It'll take a little bit longer, and if your house is chilly, that's even better. It'll shorten the setup time. And yeah, and then once they cool down, they set up, we can peel them off the parchment, and they're ready to eat. And that is all there is to it when it comes to no-bakes. It's very easy. So I'm going to start this soaking. Yeah, the cleanup isn't fun. It's fun to make. It's not fun to clean up. Yeah. I learned that the hard way when I was a kid. So I'm going to go start that soaking and put these in a safe place. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about our no-bake cheesecake. So stay tuned. Okay, we are back for our second bake of the episode. We're going to be making no-bake cheesecake, and we get to learn to make a graham cracker crust, which is going to be pretty fun. But before we get started, we are going to be making our own whipped cream. Yes, I know it's not really going to be fun, but stick with me. So before we get started on anything else, what we need to do is take the bowl that we're going to be using to mix it in, and the whisk, or if you're using a hand mixer, whatever attachment you're going to use. And for this, we're going to be using just 1 cup of cream, heavy whipping cream. We're going to go ahead and pour that in. Okay. And we're going to stick that in the freezer and get it nice and chilled. Now, if you want, you can use just regular whipped cream or whipped topping, just bought whipped cream. It's easier, it is, but if you want to learn how to make whipped cream, it's pretty easy. It takes a little bit of upper body strength, but, you know, it's not too hard. So either way is fine, quite frankly. Okay. All right. So next, what we've done is I've melted a stick of butter, and we've got our packaged graham crackers. So what I'm going to do is open these up and just dump them straight into a plastic bag. You've heard my tirades on single-use plastics before. Yes, I know. But I have yet to figure out a better way to do this, quite frankly. All right, we're going to get as much of the air out of that as we can and seal it. And, you know, this is a great thing to do when you're really stressed out because it's very cathartic. I feel better. Excuse me. Okay, no, seriously. Don't go crazy with it because you'll break the bag open and nobody wants that. I like to do this just to break up the larger things and then give it a roll. Now, this is never going to get this completely uniform. I realize that, and that's okay. You know, you just don't want any large pieces. You want to get everything down to just to flip it upside down. There we go. All right. Handle that. All right, and we can go ahead and pour these in a bowl. And then pour in our stick of melted butter. Okay. And this is optional. You don't have to do this, but I think it gives it a nice little flavor. I like to put in about a teaspoon of cinnamon. Okay. So you can mix this up with a fork if you want. I know that the butter is probably going to be a little bit hot. I tend to use my fingers. You guys know me by now. This is just my style. I think this works better than a fork anyway because you can kind of pull stuff up from the bottom and sort of squeeze the butter into it in one motion. Okay. There you go. All right. Now, you don't have to do this. I know some people use those disposable metal pie plates, which are a little bit more forgiving for this kind of thing. But this is just a normal pie plate. It's, what is it? 9.5 inches. Pretty standard. So what I'm going to do is give it a little bit of a buttering, and then we'll start laying our crust in. I honestly don't know if the buttering is actually going to help, but when I made my practice batch, it was kind of a pain in the butt to get it out, so I figure it couldn't hurt, right? Alright. And then just like before, smooth it out, make sure. Alright. And then we can go ahead and start with our crust. And just make sure that you have a fairly even layer, no holes in it. Make sure you can't see the tabletop through the bottom of the crust. And you can do sides if you want, or you can not do sides. That's up to you. And sometimes what I like to do is just make a fist and use it to push down into the corners. Get it level and push it all the way into the corners at the same time. There we go. Okay. And with the stuff that's left, I can leave a little edge on it. But you don't have to if you don't want to. Now, for normal cheesecake, it is not this simple. It involves springform pans and water baths, and yeah, I don't have the energy for that right now. We'll get to that in a different episode, but I may have to have my sister come on here because she's like the queen of cheesecake. There we go. That is the last of it. Give it a little once over. Make sure everything is filled. Alright. That's looking great. Alright, now what we're going to do is just stick this in the freezer for however long it takes us to finish our cheesecake. And it should be good to go. Okay. There we go. Alright. Now we can start on the first part of the filling. Once I clean my hands. Okay. Alright. So I've got my socket, 2 containers of cream cheese. That's, what, about a cup of cream cheese? It's 16 ounces. Ooh! I'm covered with crumbs. Okay, that's nice and soft. Alright. And then what we want to do is add a half of a cup of sugar. and a half of a cup of cream. This is separate from the whipping cream. This is going to go in the body of the pie filling. Now, if you don't want to use cream, this will create a little bit of a softer pie. If you want a little bit firmer, that's fine. You can forego the cream and use sour cream. But if you do that, you don't want to put in the half teaspoon of lemon that we are going to put in. Give it a little bit of a zest. Still cream in there. Come on. And just a teaspoon of vanilla to round out the flavor. Okay, then we're going to give that a good mix. Why we soften the cream cheese, just to make it easier. Of course, if you have a mixer, it won't, make that much of a difference. Okay, just want to make sure everything's combined and smooth. You want to make sure everything is well combined now, because once we add the whipped cream to it, you don't want to mix it anymore than you need to combine those two. So make sure you have a good mix right now, so we won't run into problems later. Okay. I think that's good. Still a little lumpy, but alright, I think that will be good. So what we're going to do is stick this in the freezer for a minute, stick it in the fridge for a minute, and then get our cream out of the freezer. There you go. Okay. Now this is nice and cold. You can leave it in there a little longer if you want. It'll just help the process along some. Okay, so we have, what is this, 2 or 3 teaspoons of sugar. You don't have to add the sugar if you want, but if you do, make sure you add it very slowly and gradually as you're mixing. Okay. And then, oh my gosh, my dress is like static for crumbs in this episode. And then, what we want to do is just start beating the crap out of it with our whisk. Now I realized Saturday, the week before this gets posted, I'm filming this on a Monday. I realized a couple days ago when I went to make my test batch that last episode I destroyed the one hand mixer insert that I had left because I loaned it to an idiot and he lost all the others. So I had one lonely whisk and it died, and I just realized this 2 days ago. So I had to do this by hand. But I think it's better because you'll get to see the process a little bit better and see how long it actually takes, and hopefully not be, it won't be too daunting for you in the future if you decide to do this. And like I said, it is perfectly acceptable to just use store-bought whipped cream, really. It's way easier. Quite frankly, I'm kind of wishing I decided to do it for this recipe, but, I have to be all old school. I was out cutting down trees yesterday and my arm is killing me. I'm going to add just a tiny little bit of sugar. And you don't have to put sugar in. There's enough sugar in the recipe, but I like to just a little bit extra. If you like it a little sweeter, you can add a little more. If you don't like it as sweet, you can just omit it from this step entirely. That's fine. Ooh. Should have been doing yard work yesterday. Oh, man. As you can see, it is starting to thicken up. I'd say we're maybe about halfway there. Put a little bit more sugar in. already you can see it starting to thicken up. You can see the trails the whisk is making in it. This is also basically how you make butter, but it's going to take longer. So the good thing is, if you overbeat it for what your intended purpose is, you can just keep right on going and you'll make butter. But if you overbeat it and you need it a little bit thinner, you can go ahead and put a little bit of cream in and mix it up slowly and carefully. Okay, there we go. That is looking really good. For this, we're going to be folding it into the batter that we just made. So it's not a bad idea to make it a little bit stiffer than you would normally, just so it can stand up a little bit to that. Ooh, I hate doing this. Okay, yeah, that looks pretty good. All right. Now, as you can see, it's holding its shape pretty well. Nice and fluffy. All right. So we're going to go ahead and take our batter back out and take our crust back out and combine everything. Okay. Now, this is going to be a little bit difficult because we have to, what is called, fold in the whipped cream into the batter. So what I like to do, kind of a little hole in there, and we can start putting this in. Now we've whipped up all this nice air into this to make it nice and fluffy, and this will help give it its shape because we're not going to be cooking it. So you don't want to be too rough with it. Like I said, you want to make sure that the rest of the batter is done by the time you start putting this in, because you will not be able to fix it, or you'll lose all your height. There we go. All right. Now, carefully just fold it over. There we go. Like that. And be very gentle, because we do not want to work any of the air out of it, because I worked really hard to get that air in there. My arm is killing me. All right. Go. Very gently keep turning. And you'll be able to see some streaks of white in there and some streaks of yellow and a little bit of different textures. Just keep an eye on it. As soon as it looks like everything is combined and you don't see any difference in the colors, stop. That's pretty good, I think. Okay. Alright, and now all that's left is to add it to our chilled crust. And then gently smooth it around. Now what you're going to want to do is let this sit in the fridge for at least 3 hours, I would say. More likely overnight. 3 hours at the minimum. Overnight would be best, just to make sure everything sets up and the flavors get all nice and combined. Now we can go ahead and, again, very gently just smooth it down. Smooth it out to the edges. Starting from the middle and pushing out. You don't want to mess up your nicely laid crust here. There we go. and this will be a little bit harder than this in consistency. Like if you cut it, it will be fairly soft, but it won't sog out. Get soggy, of course. If you, like I said before, if you want it to be a little bit of a tougher consistency, you can go ahead and add in some sour cream and take out the second batch of heavy cream that we have in there, the half cup, and the lemon. There we go. And that is good. Very good. And that is going to be really delicious. Okay. And that's it for our no-bake cheesecake. It took a few extra steps than what we're used to, but still very simple and very delicious. But so when we come back, we're going to go ahead and start making our Zabaglione, and we're going to get to play with the double boiler, so that'll be fun. So join us back here in just a sec. All right, everybody, we are back for our third bake, our Zabaglione or Sabaglione. Depending if you prefer the Italian or the French version of it, it's pretty much the same thing. Now, we're going to be making what is essentially an egg custard cooked over a double boiler. Double boilers are also called bain-maries, if you're, again, with the French. Basically, it is just a setup where you have a metal bowl. Stainless steel or copper is best, but you can use glass as long as it's heat proof. And you set it on another pot full of boiling water, just enough so that the water will not touch the bottom of the bowl. Now we're going to be doing the baking in this and the boiling in that. It's just leaving a little bit of extra room between the eggs and the heat to keep them from cooking too hard, basically. Keep them from scrambling, we'll say. So I went out and I got this at, where did I get this? I don't know, grocery store the other day. So we're going to get started, and first we have to separate our eggs. Now, I could have done this off camera, but I know there's a lot of different ways to do this, and I wanted to do it on camera so you can see my technique. I know some people put it in their hands and they let the whites run through, and some people have different gimmicks and gizmos that they have bought usually on infomercials that don't do anything except separate whites from yolks. So this is just pretty easy. You're using what you have on hand. I'm just going to crack, have the shell, and then move the yolk back and forth, dripping the lighter egg white off the edges. Alright, forgive the minor edit. My camera is trying to become sentient again. I don't know what's going on. So anyway, alright, we have one egg yolk in our stainless steel bowl. So let's keep going. You go carefully, split the shell, and use it as a cup to hold the yolk while you drain out the white. And sometimes this thick albumin, you can kind of just grab it and toss it in. There we go. Alright, yolk number 3. It's giving me a little bit of trouble here. Okay. There we go. Now, if you want, you can rinse these shells out and keep them for composting purposes, which is something we're going to talk about on a much later episode of Florimagoria. Sometimes they make fertilizer with these and banana peels and wood ash. It does wonders. So keep that in mind when you're using a lot of eggs. It's definitely something, well, I was going to say something cheap, but as we all know, eggs are not cheap right now as I'm filming. But it's something easy that you probably have around the house. That albumin does not want to come off. There we go. Ha ha ha. I win. Alright, that is all 5 egg yolks. I'm going to go ahead and toss these off to the side. Alright. And as you can see, I've kept the whites here. Maybe tomorrow I'll stick these in the fridge. Maybe tomorrow I'll make a an egg white omelet. Oh wait, no, I don't hate myself, so I'm not going to do that. Actually, with my test batch, I've been putting them in with the eggs in the morning. But they're perfectly good egg whites. You don't need to do anything with them. Alright, so now we have our yolks. We're going to add our 6 tablespoons of white sugar. Oh, and in the meantime, while you're doing this, you want to turn on your heat and get that water boiling. As you can see, I have it on the large burner, and I have it on high, and that's going to start boiling. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and whisk these up. As you can hear, you can probably hear that scraping, maybe. I don't know, my microphone isn't good. But that's the sugar. You're going to want to get that all nice and mixed in. Oh, again with the whisking. Oh, my arm. Pretty good. Nice and yellow there. Now, a note on wine. I don't drink. Really, I don't drink wine when I do drink, which is not very often. So I saw in doing research for this that a lot of people suggesting using Marsala, which this is, but I didn't know what Marsala tasted like. So I bought it, and I don't really like it. And my rule is, when you're cooking with wine, actually it's Alton Brown's rule, because I'm a big Alton Brown fan. He says, don't ever cook with wine that you don't want to eat, or that you don't want to drink, rather. And this stuff is, I mean, it's fine, but I think I was expecting something a little bit more on the red dessert wine, something a little bit sweeter. This is not, but I think this is probably the more traditional route, and we're putting in so little that it's going to be fine anyway. It's not going to have a really strong flavor. Now, another note, I know a lot of people believe that when they heat up alcohol in a dish, that it will remove almost all of the actual alcohol from it, so it will be no longer alcoholic. That's not entirely true. That's a bit of a fallacy. The reality is there's a lot more alcohol left over than most people think, so if you're serving this to a child, you know, don't put that in. It's perfectly fine without it. It just gives a little bit of extra flavor, or you can just use like a cooking wine, like a red cooking wine, or sweet red cooking wine. If you have a dry red cooking wine, go ahead and up the sugar content a little bit. You know, just go ahead and taste it. If you don't like it, put more sugar in. It's fine. I actually read some, while I was doing research for this, I read some people suggesting that if you're giving it to children, you could go ahead and put some espresso in, because that's what kids need, caffeine. Like, no, thank you. Alright, so as you can see, and hopefully hear, our water is boiling very nicely, so we're going to go ahead and pop this on. And again, you want to make sure that that boiling water is not touching the eggs. Go ahead and start mixing that up. It's only going to be a few minutes, and I seem to have misplaced my glove. Okay. Don't do this. I'm just doing... do as I say, not as I do. You don't want to let that go too long, but I needed to grab my friendly oven mitt here. And... okay. Now that it's heated up, we're going to go ahead and pour in our Marsala wine. And give that a nice stir. As you can see, it's starting to bubble up very nicely. That's exactly what we want. That's the proper first step. It should start bubbling up, and then it'll start to thicken. Just make sure you keep stirring and keep scraping the bowl, especially with... Alright, we had another minor technical glitch. My show is famous for those. Okay. But this is good because you can get a bit of a close-up here. And you can see that the color is starting to change. It's getting a little bit frothy. The bubbles have lessened. And when you pick it up with your whisk, it makes trails. And we don't want it to get too thick, and we're in a bit of danger of doing that right now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the heat, pull it out of our water, and I'm going to switch this back. No. Action cam! I'm going to go ahead and switch this back to our regular view, so we'll be back in just a sec. Okay, we are back, and our Zabaglione, or Sabaglione, however you want to pronounce it, is looking really delicious. Nice and thick, perfectly cooked, and when it cools down a little bit, it's going to be a little bit thicker, so make sure you keep that in mind. And as you can see, I have cut up some lovely blueberries and strawberries, and I know when people eat this by itself, they do tend to think that the wine is a little bit overwhelming to the rest of the flavor. But I found that when you eat it with strawberries and blueberries, the fruit, the tartness and the sweetness of the fruit tends to work really, really well with the wine flavor. So I don't really want to drink this by itself, but it is delicious with fruit. So here we have our drunken custard, which honestly kind of sounds like a Tom Waits song. When I'm drinking drunken custard with the ghost of the hobo who drank himself to death during the last ice storm. Well, gee, wasn't that great? Thanks for joining us for another Bad Tom Waits impression minute. Back to you in the studio, Mary! I got nothing. Yeah. I'm sorry, folks. I think I need to go lay down, chug some alcoholic custard, and have a think about my life. What am I doing? Yeah, this has been kitchen witchin'. You know, ugly kitchen, whatever. I'm gonna go.